Trigger warning, this episode contains discussion of BDSM, submission and power play.
It's not thinking about anything. I get that roller coaster feeling. It's like kind of how I imagine flying might feel. It's that kind of suspension, which is lovely. It's like everything stops for a moment.
Hello, so this is Alice. We talk in this episode about boundaries, BDSM, doing Duolingo in between orgasms, and attending Anne Summers parties at a very early age, amongst other things. It's a crackerjack one. I did it with Alice, the episode. We actually have never had sex a couple of years ago. It was my first ever Come As You Are record. As you can hear, we're on a bed. I think I chose to do that because at the time, I assumed all the recordings would be on a bed, prevalent to the podcast, but also obviously wanted to be like Paulie Yates, the icon that was on Big Breakfast. That's British breakfast TV back in the 90s. Maybe early noughties? Can't remember, but definitely during my childhood, a staple of getting ready for school. And she interviewed all of her guests on a big old bed. Look, it's sexy. It's an intimate record. You get that, but you lose a lot in sound quality / just general duvet shuffling. So I've never done another on the bed. It was my bed. I don't think I've clarified that. It wasn't just some random's bed, although maybe that would have lended even more of a sexual frisson. Alice is a friend of mine. She ran. What is pandemic life? Before everything had to be paused, she was instrumental as part of a collective of artists running the best comedy night / live art night in southeast London. They really stepped up their presence online during the pandemic. Who bloody hasn't? And I will tag some of their stuff in the episode notes. But yeah, Alice is a real driving force within that group. She's a writer, a performer, a director, a dramaturg, a clown. We mentioned that at one point. I wanted to head it up because otherwise it seems really weird when I go, we're both clowns, as if I'm insulting her. I'm not at all. If you've listened to any of these episodes, especially the Sam Holdsworth one, you will know that for me, calling someone an idiot is the highest acclaim. I am doing this recording for the intro on International Women's Day. What have I done for International Women's Day? Oh, well, you might be able to hear it in my voice. I've had a little spoonful of peanut butter chased by a teaspoon of black cherry jam. It's not something I don't do every single day, but let's pretend it's something to be celebrated. That's what the day is all about, right? Just appreciating yourself extra and bigging up the brilliant women in your life. Speaking of which, I am so lucky to produce this podcast alongside Lorna Rose Treen and Daisy Grant. I know I big them up at the end of every episode, but I wanted to do it at the beginning just in case you don't listen to that bit. And you can contribute to the making of this podcast monetarily, please, through our Patreon and our Ko-fi. We are www.kofi.com/Helen Duff and www.patreon.com/Helen Duff. The first is for a one-off donation. The second is for a continued donation and a bunch of extra audio treats which only Patreon subscribers can access. Plus some little writings as well. Fun times. So, without further ado, I better go and brush my teeth. We all remember what the dentist said to me the other day, although apparently some of us continue to ignore her advice and just live our lives as a literal jammy bitch. Oh, one last thing I have to mention, otherwise it's going to throw you right off rhythmically. There's no orgasm at the end. There is an orgasm at some point in the show, and there's a cracking orgasm joke in the final moments of the episode. Gosh, it's going to really float your boat. Get ready for that. But I just wanted you to know that it's not exactly the same as the rest of our eps because it was such an early record, and we just thought, shake it up. Sex isn't always the same. Here's Alice.
So at this Anne Summers party, I won a vibrator, and it was like a little dolphin. That's all it was. It was a tiny little dolphin. It's very cute.
Was it doing like
so
a
it was on
jump,
like
so it was slightly curved?
It was slightly curved, and then that just vibrated. It was like jelly, and then it was on just like a stick, but I don't know if you were supposed to use the stick. I didn't. I just used the dolphin. I remember I took...
That sounds like a great angle, actually.
It's good. It's cute.
Yeah.
And I remember starting to use that, and that was like then I got quite lazy, and I would only ever use that.
Right.
And then I've always had a vibrator since then, at least one. And I grew up with a mother who was very open about sex toys, probably too much.
Yeah.
But like she used to show me like the things that her boyfriend bought her, and like would be like, look on my shelf, I've got condoms, I want you to know I'm practicing safe sex. So she was I think her mum was quite repressed Catholic, who was like, don't watch kissing, it's evil on the TV.
Yeah.
So for me, she was like, do whatever you like. And then when I was about 8, I remember I had a chat with her because I started doing that thing that a lot of kids do, where I would rub against the sheet or a pillow, and I like basically hump a pillow, and I was like, it feels really nice. And I was about 8, and my mum was like, it's fine, that's like a normal thing, don't be embarrassed by that.
What a great response.
Yeah, it was really good, but obviously I was still a bit like... But then me and a friend of mine used to, like, I always remember in her grandfather's house, weird, guest room, and there were 2 single beds. She was 4 years younger than me, and I like showed her how to do it, and we'd like rush away, but on 2 beds.
That's great,
in the same room.
Because I remember, basically doing the same action that I still do, probably when I was around 8 or 9.
Yeah, I was quite, from about 8, yeah, definitely. I would wank regularly, but I never told anyone, and I was quite late bloomer when it came to like kissing anyone.
Me too.
And people thought I was very like, they wouldn't necessarily think that I was wanking away after school.
It's weird that
the
split that then creates in your kind of thought about yourself, the way that you kind of build like a little secret life, which then is quite hard to make the transition between like, this is my secret life, my little private thing that I really enjoy with myself actually, and then when you start having sex with someone else, sharing that.
I found wanking in front of someone, the first time I ever wanked in front of someone on a pillow on my front, was a very liberating moment. It was one of the best orgasms I've ever had.
Wow.
But it was so like, I felt quite embarrassed, but I think that also fed into the situation.
That's
but
cool.
That's a whole
That's
new
really
topic.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So mentally you felt quite exposed.
Definitely.
That was exciting.
But he was very supportive of it and was like, you obviously want to do it.
Yeah.
But I was a bit like, oh, I don't know if I want to do it in front of you.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting mindset to be in. But for me, it's like...
But you were still able to get over it?
Yeah.
It didn't stop you?
No. And I think for me, it's that, like, letting go of being embarrassed. That's the feel... Because I'm quite an anxious person.
Yeah.
And I think when you orgasm, you don't think about it's not thinking about anything. I get that roller coaster feeling. It's like kind of how I imagine flying might feel. It's that kind of suspension. Yeah. Which is lovely. It's like everything stops for a moment.
Kind of like the moment when you're on a swing and you reach the top.
Yeah.
Just before you then...
Yeah, definitely.
Come down.
And now when I think about orgasms, they're kind of linked to me a little bit to do with power play and like submission, and that's where it's called subspace when you go into a... It's a bit like that feeling, I guess, when you orgasm, climax. But it's a space where you have no... You're just completely in that moment. You're not thinking about anything else. It's like a moment. It's like I think, and it's with... I don't like saying regular sex and submissive sex. I don't like saying that because I think if you find the right person to do it with, they can blur. And that's what really turns me on at the moment.
Yeah.
The idea that someone can dominate you privately. And if I'm quite loud, like, and quite confident when I'm out. And if I'm with someone and they dominate me privately and they can subtly do it in public, that's a big turn on to me.
Wow.
But I mean, I've not had that much experience of it.
How does it work if it works?
But it would just be like, if you have a code, like if there's a rule that you have in the bedroom, that they might slip into a conversation or they might whisper something in your ear at the dinner table if you're with friends. Like that to me is really sexy because it's like something that's private between you. But I'm somebody I'm very private. I don't talk that much about... It's funny because we're doing it now, but I don't talk about my sex life to many people.
When you told me, I was really surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not because I... any judgment attached to it, just because I... Yeah, didn't expect it. essentially, I guess, because
and I think I get
not
off
the kind of
on
person who goes around. Yeah,
I don't talk about it openly, which I think I would like to a bit more, and I'm trying to write a bit more about it and my own experiences.
At the same time, though, I think it's good to have boundaries.
Yeah, for me, it's just like,
especially when it's something that's special to you. We do a lot of, obviously, this podcast seems like anathema to that, but I think there is a line to be drawn around keeping certain spaces special
and intimate, and it's between the two people there.
Yeah,
which is, and one of the most intimate relationships I've ever had was with, and also I'm very open with people I date now about what I like, and that was a very freeing, liberating process, because I've had a boyfriend in the past who I said that I was into BDSM, and he was like, I'm up for trying stuff, and it ended up being very much about him and what he thought dominating me meant. And actually, if you read about submission, it is about the person who's submitting. The attention is all on them. And that's it's amazing as well to have that much attention focused on making you relax. And it's about relaxation for me as well. It's release of like stress and anxiety, worrying. I worry a lot. It's trying not to worry about things, because you're in that moment. You can't think about anything else. Sometimes when you have sex with someone, again, I don't want to say regular sex, but sometimes you can be a bit like, oh, I've got this to do as well, and I've got this, and you're enjoying it, but you're like, oh, really, like, especially if it, time constraints, that's never sexy, is it? But it's like, oh, I really need to leave though, because I need to get to work.
I felt really guilty the other day because I had exactly that experience, and that's what I mean, I think, about being too honest. I think in my body I'm maybe too honest, because I think I like to do something fully or not at all.
I'm the same. I think if I don't have the time, and I think that's problems I've had with exes before, they're like, oh, we'll do a scene or something, and I'm like, but I don't have time. I have 20 minutes and then I need to eat my breakfast and go to work, and it's like, I'm not going to be able to relax, I'm not going to be able to orgasm because I'm not relaxed.
I love this image. So they're just like, but please, you could be the nurse, I could be just 10 minutes. Yeah, but when am I going to get my Weetabix?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I need 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
Turn that off, I need a wee.
I'll tell you about my first ever like proper experience.
Great.
Well, actually not first ever, because the first guy I met, the guy who I was very close with, and we saw each other for like a year on and off, but we were friends. It was I've never really had a relationship with someone where we just have sex and we're friends. I'm not really a very casual person. I once had sex with a friend, and then he asked me if I wanted to stay for steak with his mum and dad, and I ran away.
You made the right choice there.
But I remember, so I'd met this guy on this site, and we'd had this amazing conversation about sexuality. And in hindsight, what I loved about it as well was because I didn't really realise, but he was like probing me for what I liked. We had these really kind of philosophical conversations, massive, like too long, you know, when you send a really, really long text and then you're like, oh, sorry, it's an essay at the end. That kind of thing. We sent loads of these messages about things that turned me on that I'd never explored. So ideas of like someone being able to undermine my intelligence, that turns me on. And somebody who could take something I say and turn it round on me. Or someone that, because I think with power play, especially in sex, I'm quite cheeky. I like to undermine it. And if I undermine it and they don't realise, then I lose respect.
Such a turn off, yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, well, I've basically just like made you look like an idiot.
It's essentially like somebody not getting your joke.
And yeah, exactly. And I trick people. I trick people. And then if they are tricked, then I'm like, oh, you couldn't dominate. And so for me, that's why it can't be casual either, because it takes quite a lot for me to trust someone enough to completely submit to them, because I'm like, you need to be on it, otherwise.
That's so fascinating. So in the build-up to submitting to somebody, essentially you are putting them through a little bit of a test.
It's like an interview, yeah.
Yeah. So you're quite powerful that whole lead-up before you let yourself...
I think the person submitting is the most powerful one in the dynamic, because they're allowing themselves to submit. I think if it's more casual, not necessarily, and that's when feelings can be hurt, I think, and you read lots of stories online, and people submit to people and they don't read the signs, and people get accidentally hurt, and horrible. And normally, from my experience with the kink community, everyone's very open with each other, very honest, and it taught me a lot about what I think relationships should be.
Yeah.
So we had this big long chat, me and this guy, and then I've never had this before as well, so up until that point I'd only had sex with people that I knew quite well, we were friends, or like I knew I'd probably date. Yeah, but with this guy we had this chat, and it basically turned out I could tell that he'd done both, and at first he'd switched, and I'd never met someone who had switched before.
Between dom
and submissive, yeah. And I was like, I don't know if that puts me off, the fact that he's submitted. And which was and so I asked him a lot about that, and then he had more experiences as a submissive, and he was like, explaining the feelings he liked, and it became very clear that what he liked in submitting was what I like. I liked the idea of, because I'd never done it. Someone said to me, they were like, well, you're an actor, so it's like playing a part. And I said, no. For me, it's not like playing a part. It's being real, and it's like, it's not scripted. And that's really important to me. I'm not going to fake submission. I could play that part if I wanted to make someone happy, but I don't want... That won't make me happy. No. That's not what's going to get me off.
So, sticky, or people do it badly, is because obviously, especially if you're a woman, there are loads of situations in which you end up being less powerful, inferior, let's say, rather than using the same word as submissive, not by your own volition. And so one of the reasons why actively making the choice to be submissive and giving somebody that power, giving it to them, is exciting, is because it's sort of enacting a lived experience that you've had but haven't had a say-so over. Yeah,
it's definitely about that. It's, for me anyway, I can't speak for every woman who can, but it's that choice, and it's giving that control away. For me, I find very relaxing.
Yeah.
Because then I'm like, I'm not in control of this moment, and that's amazing. But I am in control because I've said what I like. We've said what's like. I've said what I'm not happy with, or what I don't want, and that's very clear. And that's something I learnt very quickly. And I think where things get sticky with King especially is, you don't do it if you're feeling, personally, and this is the rules I've always had, not when you've been drinking, because like the views, and you can misjudge things, I think, when you've been drinking, and not if you're feeling low.
Yeah, the first time you had sex with this guy.
So so I met him, so we had all this discussion, it was very interesting, and then one night he turned it, it went quite sexual. It was about if I did something, if I said something, what he would do.
Right.
And it was very sexy, because I was like, oh, he's actually trying to take a bit of control now. And I was very interested by the...
Cool, so you're cooking dinner.
Yeah.
And he says, if you try and put garlic in this bolognese, I will... That kind of thing.
That kind of thing, yeah. And I love that, yeah. There has to be garlic in a bolognese.
Absolutely. What? Well, that would give you something to fight against, right?
Yeah, what? And I like fighting as well. I'm not a submissive person in life, but I'm not a overly confrontational person.
Yeah.
And I find in the bedroom I can be quite confrontational, and it's really fun.
Yeah.
To just be like, no, I don't want that. But then sometimes I do want it. It's very confusing. And that's why I think you need to be really intimate with someone, so that they know what you actually want.
Right.
But with this person, I met him, and we had this really interesting discussion. We were talking... he ended up sitting quite close to me. He made me feel quite uncomfortable, but I was finding that very sexy, this feeling. And then, I'm going to tell you, it's ridiculous. So he was like, we're going to go to M&S and we're going to buy something together. And I was like, okay. And we went to M&S on Holloway Road, and he picked up this horrible nightie, like the most horrible nightie you've ever seen. And like it was like £12 or something. He was like, and I was like, I do not want this nightie. It was hideous. He was like, he gave me the money, and he was like, go and buy this nightie. And he was like, and he just like watched me buy it. He wasn't next to me or anything. And it was so intrusive, and I found it really embarrassing and quite humiliating, but it was very unusual feeling. I'd never felt like that before. Not because none of my ex-boyfriends had asked me to buy a weird thing that I wouldn't want. But it was a really interesting and exciting feeling, and I didn't really know what it was like, but I was enjoying it. It's funny. I think good BDSM is you can laugh about it afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's where this story is going. There's a lot of laughter in this story at the end. So I bought it, and then I said, do you want to come to my house? And I've never done that before. I've never met someone on that day and had sex with them, ever. And it felt like a really big deal. But I felt like I knew him because we've had all these discussions. And obviously I was very safe, and I'd spoken to friends and said I was meeting someone, and there's a thing called a safety call that you sometimes you set up with a friend. We had a very funny time. It was like very intense. And we had like a year where we were on and off, and we would see each other, and it would always be in those kind of roles. One of the best thing ever, and the thing that turned me on the most, and often we didn't have like penetrative sex, and he wouldn't even touch me, but it was incredible. Like, it was very intimate. And one time I went to his house, and I'd never been to his house before, and I met him. I was meeting him at a station, and he texted me. He said, I want you to walk this way. And I was like, are you not meeting me here? And he was like, I just want you to walk that way. And I knew he was watching me. And it was so sexy. But it was fear. Fear is such a powerful emotion. But when harnessed and used, when you're in control of it, it's very exciting. I said to my friend recently, I said, one of the best sexual, I was about to say session, sounds odd, but some of the best sex I had with this person, actually, who I saw for a while, he didn't take his clothes off. I did, but he didn't take his clothes off, and we didn't have penetrative sex, and I never saw his penis, but it was incredible. And my friend was like, that isn't sex. And I was like, to you maybe it isn't, but to me, to go through that roller coaster of emotions and to feel like scared, excited, like absolute, like completely liberated, free to be myself in front of someone, and that's so intimate. That was, really incredible.
You're no fun anymore. All you do is work that cleared. I need more to get at ease.
That's the badger.
Now, to have good sex, it's about being honest with my partner about things that I've enjoyed in the past, things that I like exploring, and if they want to explore it with me, that's amazing. And it's going to be different with everyone, like everyone's experience of, and that's what I love about when you meet people who are into kink as well. It's great because everyone has such different views, and it's amazing because like what turns me on won't turn on the next person, and something they're into, I'm like, oh, I can get it, but it's not for me. And I love that like everyone is so different in what they like. And I think the problem for me was, for so long I knew what I liked, but I didn't want to say it because I was like, it makes me super weird, or it's really not feminist, or I'm not I'm not being a powerful woman if I like that.
How did you know? No. Is that because you... Sorry, it sounded like I was doing a Destiny's Child.
Yeah, no.
I meant like, for sure, be so certain. Is it because it's just what you visualised and fantasised about?
Yeah, and things, and just I would sometimes, when I had sex with exes, I would imagine them saying things to me.
Right.
But I wouldn't tell them. I would just imagine them. A bit like what you were saying earlier about the idea of being watched. I remember with one partner, I remember where I was as well, but I remember I would imagine I was being watched through a window by someone else. And that,
whilst having sex.
And that felt slightly degrading because they were watching without my permission.
Right.
And I enjoyed that feeling of being observed.
That's fascinating. I think I would probably play that out as being as if you were so desirable that people wanted to come to the window and watch.
I don't know, maybe. But it was, I remember having that thing where I was like, and that made me orgasm actually, because I wasn't, and I felt like I was close, and then I imagined people watching.
Yeah.
And that pushed me to the edge.
Is there something about pain? Is there something tied in? Because I'm really interested in the way that BDSM can help you to reclaim certain states that you might have been pushed into or existed within, where you weren't in control of it, and then you get to kind of play it out in your sexual life, where you are in control of it. It's something you're asking for, it's something you're enjoying and taking pleasure from.
The phrase I've used with people before, which people use, is consensual non-consent. Right. Which is giving that consent to not be in charge in that time. Yeah. Because that's, things that you do in private and empower you in private, you wouldn't enjoy if it was not consented. So it's it's an interesting boundary, when I think it's reclaiming that is definitely the right way of describing that. Pain is is just dependent on what you enjoy as well. I like being pushed, just in a direction maybe that I fight against at first. Yeah. I like being challenged. I think that's the right thing. I like sex sometimes to be challenging. I still feel in myself there's barriers in certain parts of my life where I'm like, I can see the barrier inside my head. And I'm like, I know. And I know, sometimes it's comforting. I'm like, I know I'll break that at some point, but I know I've still got work to do on that. And I think most people have that in different areas of their life. But I find it really liberating that with sex now, I feel that I'm starting to push those barriers. And I'm doing that myself, but I'm letting people help me do that. It's about asking for help as well, I think, a lot.
Yeah. So what are they saying, though? Are they giving you verbal cues, like, you need to do this, Alice? Or are they physically...
I think for me it's less about pain, it's more about, like, mental challenges. Yeah. So about being made to do things that I'm like, I do not want to do that at all. But that's really turns me on. The idea that I'm like, no, and they just say, it's definitely a sadistic kind of thing, that balance. I think the difference between, like, dominance come in all shapes and sizes, and it's all different types of domination. Some people are very loving and caring when they dominate. Some people are, like, very strict, and, like, there are strict rules and you write them all out. I quite like, what I've enjoyed is quite a sadistic form of, like, you don't know what's going to happen. You're kind of on edge the whole time. And I don't like horror films. And someone said to me once, who I was talking sex with, they were like, but you like feeling uneasy in your sex life. And I was like, maybe that's, for me, that's more real than with a film. I don't know.
And it's not even that you like feeling, well, this is putting words into your mouth. Yeah. Is it that you like feeling uneasy, which is the kind of word that you would use for a horror film? Yeah. Or is it that you like exploring in a contained space, that in between? It's that exciting, sort of ambiguity, that, like, I don't really know where
is that too lies. Far? Yeah. Is that not? Yeah, and it's private and it's safe, and you know you know the person well. I think you can only go further with someone once you get to know them more. I guess, like any sex, like, I feel like sex normally gets better when you've been with someone for longer, and that's what I find exciting about BDSM. Like, the longer you spend with someone, the more that they can push you, and the more they realise what kind of things you really don't like, and they might use that to kind of torture you a bit. Cool. And I find that that's very sexy.
Do you mind if we try?
Yeah, sure.
So once someone wrote a poem about how he was going to, like, take me down to this place where I would be, like, wriggling around and desperate, basically. Yeah. And he made me read the poem out, and I hated this fucking poem. And it made me laugh because I hated the poem.
So anything after that poem that actually happened? Did you get taken down to a place where you had to wriggle and write? I've
wriggled before. I hate wriggling. That's something I don't like.
You don't like wriggling?
No, I don't like wriggling. And I've been, like, one of the... It's funny. Now, when I look back on it, I laugh a lot, and we have conversations, me and him, we're still friends, where I'm like, I can't believe you made me do that, and we're, like, cracking up about it over coffee.
You probably have to be more specific, because I would imagine, if I was listening to this, you were being whipped, you were being cut.
Oh, no.
But we're actually talking about you being made to wriggle.
Yeah. I've had tape around my thighs, and my shins, and he was like, "You're a little worm," and like wriggle about on the floor, which isn't sexy. No. And that's what I find hilarious about the sex. Yes. It's not sexy, but it's liberating. Yes. It's fun.
Because we are also clowns.
Yeah.
And for somebody to be able to be foolish with you, I find
and to make you look like a fool. You can't take yourself too seriously. And I think that's a very liberating feeling. And I think I take myself less seriously since I've explored sex in that way. I remember once he made a little song about a mop, and he'll probably listen to this. What the hell, Alice?
No, but, I think if he's listening, he's so cool.
Yeah.
Somebody made up a song about a mop to turn me on.
It was like a nursery rhyme, and I was like, that's a hideous song. And he was like, I like to just wash my hair, and he was like, sing the song. And I was like, oh, and I don't like singing. That's something I really find, singing something I really struggle with performance-wise. I get very nervous. Have to sing in an audition or anything. And he knew that. And he was like, and it's great because you kind of overcome fears as well in the room. Yes. It's great. But he was like, sing the song and like mop the floor.
A therapeutic process of BDSM sex.
Mopping the floor with my hair and singing
with
a song.
With your hair?
Yeah.
What an amazing thing.
But that, to me,
I wish I could film
think that as,
That's so funny.
I bet you would, yeah.
I mean, I'm terrible. I'll film anything.
Like, I've talked about laughter as well.
Yeah.
A lot in the bedroom. And like, I like when you're close to someone you can laugh, but I've talked a lot about, with the person I saw, about someone laughing at me.
Yeah.
And that is something that I find really interesting because, but it's not on my terms, they're laughing at me. It's not like I've written something or I'm doing something on stage to make someone laugh. They're laughing at me. That's quite an interesting
and you don't
dynamic.
Like that?
No, but I do like it because I don't like it. It's
okay.
hard to explain.
That's so cool.
But I quite, that's quite a fun thing to play with.
I like the way you have made such a strong choice to kind of take ownership over the things you don't like.
Yeah, it's just face those fears.
Yeah. Like, instead of going like, oh, I don't like this, stop it, make it stop, you kind of go, oh, I don't like this, let's explore why that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've always been like somebody who likes to push like limits with myself. Like, you know, if you like, once, this was so stupid, I like try and put my mouth on an ice tray because I know it's a stupid thing to do, but I'm like, go and do it. I'd like dare myself to do it. Doesn't end up well. I don't know why I did it. Don't do that. But it's like or like if you trap your finger in something, like with a peg or something, then you like push it down more because you're like, go on, do a bit more. You can do a bit more.
I have a thing where I almost lost my shit, and I don't mean physically, I didn't mean shit myself, where somebody was breathing into my ear.
Yeah.
Whilst not really holding me down, more just, I was kind of almost restricting my own movement against their body.
Yeah.
I guess we were kind of spooning.
Yeah.
It was so overwhelming in terms of this, like, just the kind of wetness and the like the amount of sound that I was getting, and I was like, wriggling doesn't even begin. I was like just having these hugely jerky responses, and it was extraordinary. But I kind of stopped it before I got to a point of, but I'm kind of intrigued now after what you said to see how much longer I could stay with the discomfort. It's
just being aware of, like, I think that's the thing about like alcohol, and like if you're feeling low, it's about being aware. You don't want to push it too far that then you feel bad. And obviously I've had experiences like that. It's just one of those that you just have to like try and be really aware of how you're feeling, and sometimes that's hard.
Did you really want this? Do you know yourself? How well do you know this?
My mum told me a really bad joke about orgasms.
What was it? I'm building this into the podcast.
Because I told her about the podcast, and she was like, oh, that's really interesting. And she's always like, I've always been very open with you about sex, haven't I? Like, well done me. And I'm like, I love it.
Yeah.
And she was like, and I was like, yeah, you definitely have. And then she was like, do you want to hear a joke about it? I'm not going to tell it well because it's not good. And I mean,
tell it like it's a very good joke.
Okay.
Do your mother justice.
Okay. Husband and a wife, very heteronormative as well, but a husband and a wife are sitting down and chatting, and he says, I wish you told me when you orgasm, because I'd love to know in the moment when you're orgasming. And she goes, well, you're never there, dear.
Such a classic.
Such a classic.
I thought you were going to say, I thought the end of that joke was going to be, I'll bear it in mind and I'll let you know when it finally happens.
Yeah, great as well.
So that was Alice. Please feel free to submit your better orgasm jokes, not taking Alice's mum down even one bit, but just saying we could probably improve. This episode was edited by Lorna Treen, and the podcast is produced by me, Helen Duff, Lorna Treen and Daisy Grant. Hit us up if you want to employ brilliant women to produce top quality audio content. This is our penultimate episode in the series. We've got one more to release after this. Wow, that is so exciting. I can't believe we've almost completed series 1. So many cool guests coming up in series 2, and the finale of this season is Chef's Kiss. Tag us in your stories if you're enjoying it. I love that. We are Come As You Are Pod on Instagram and Facebook. And keep reviewing on iTunes. J'adore that. I don't know why I'm going so French this episode. Maybe it's because I'm trying to make up for the fact that I didn't know what Duolingo was. Shame. Also, spoiler alert, no, it's not. It's a treat, just for you who stayed on to listen to the very end of the episode. I recorded this interview with Alice before I'd ever had an orgasm. Wow, I wonder how that changes the way you listen to it. Maybe you should go back, give it a second, turn around the old ear holes and let me know. I have really enjoyed this journey of finding out about other people's pleasure and expanding my understanding of my own in the process. So thank you for coming with us, and I will leave all the major thank yous to the next one. But given I am a week late celebrating International Women's Day on the pod, for the rest of this week at least, take care of yourself.